We have to keep in mind that this isn't about being right. It's about having a better world. This isn't about fighting and arguing with someone just because they're different than you or they have different feelings or different opinions than you. This is about finding a way to come together to create a better world for all. We're all humans. We all share this world. We all have problems. We all have ups and downs. We all have victories and we all have disappointments. We all have sadness and we all have happiness. And we got to unite as human beings instead of divide ourselves by these silly things, really, that are more constructs that we've created, whether they're religion, nationality, race, ethnicity, and be like, these aren't reasons why we should be separate and be apart. These are reasons why we need to come together and have better understanding to create a better world for all, because that's the objective.
What are you saying? The realest podcast in the world. I'm Osama.
My name is Mohammed, and thank you so much for joining for today's episode. As we all know what's going on as far as the Israel and Palestine conflict, it's one that requires information, it requires education, and insight from those on both sides. But the person we have on today is not as if his perspective is not only new, it comes from a different, unique angle, but the way he uses his medium as far as comedy, the art form, is a way that allows us to digest the information without being so intrusive, being so emotional, and to see in a way that everyone's able to understand through such a beautiful medium. And that is why we're so happy to have this person who's lived a life full of amazing experiences, insight as well. So we have no other than Jonathan Randall. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm feeling like my name's super white right about now with you two guys,
though. And I think my first question for you is, why do you love comedy? Like, don't talk about yourself being a comedian. What is it about comedy that gives you joy, that gives you happiness, and gives you such a euphoric feeling that most people, whether you're a comedian or those outside as the audience, will never understand?
I mean, I think everyone can understand and have a love and appreciation for comedy, and I think people do. I think not only is it used as a way to perhaps open people's minds and hearts to things that they might not be accustomed to, but it's also a way to bring joy and laughter and happiness to people. And I think everybody can appreciate that.
And on top of that, I want to get into your upbringing. Tell us about where you grew up, how you grew up, your family environment, and how those layers and nuances kind of played a background into your role as far as becoming a comedian or the journey of it as well.
I guess I had some, it's difficult to talk about. The more knowledge I have of the world and the more information I get, and especially, considering what's happening right now, it's hard not to look at my childhood and even the problems and the issues I had as still being extremely privileged. So, while part of me wants to say, like, oh, well, having a messed up childhood is what thwarted me into comedy, I do also understand and appreciate that my messed up childhood seems probably awesome to so many people around the world, and they wish that they could have, the issues and the problems that I had, because they're facing so much more difficult and so many more hardships than I even could, fathom growing up. But I did grow up in Miami Beach, Florida. I grew up in a modern Orthodox household where, my father was very strict about Judaism, and it was like a huge priority for him. And that was kind of my upbringing. And I always enjoyed making people laugh. I always enjoyed, making light of difficult situations. And I just always found it fulfilling to bring laughter to people, whether it was my friends, whether it was my siblings, whether it was my mother.
And even within that, like you talked about the privilege that you have and accessibility and things that comes with it and how you have such an advantage over others. It's something that you're born into. You didn't ask for that. You didn't wish for that. It was something that was given to you, right? So I liked about how you talked about the contrast. And even within that, like that family environment, growing up as a kid, when it came to obviously the ongoing conflict from back then, was it something that was discussed about in your house, or was it like a topic that was really silenced, or was it something that your parents gave you perspective that made yourself more open minded than maybe others in your community in Miami Beach, Florida?
It wasn't something that was talked about a lot. It definitely wasn't until I was older that I had any concept of Palestinian oppression or knew about the Nakba or, even about the occupation. And it's not like it was something that was really discussed, but I was brought up to believe that the Palestinian people were less than human, and they wanted all to murder me just because I was a Jew. And that wasn't something that like my parents sat me down and said, Jonathan, watch out, Palestinians are trying to kill you. But I think that was just kind of like, overall the sense that I got from my community, from the Hebrew day schools that I was, from my own family, from the synagogue I went to. That was kind of the information that I had about it.
My question for you is, in the realm of political comedy, how do you approach responsibility that comes with potentially influencing perspectives or opinions?
I'm sorry, your question kind of cut out. I only got part of it.
Oh, so my bad, let me repeat it. I don't know why we're having issues on our end. This is bad.
Either your internet's bad or my internet's bad.
Honestly, Toronto, Canada has the
But
worst
I
internet.
got the white privilege internet, so I'm guessing it's yours that's bad.
All right, Canada has the worst internet. I'm just gonna put it out there. Canada, you suck. But I'll repeat the question.
Oh, Canada, fucking Trudeau, get it together. Get some better internet for you, Canucks.
In the realm of political comedy, how do you approach the responsibility that comes with potentially influencing perspectives or opinions?
I mean, listen, I think it's important to share political ideas and to use comedy as a platform to express your opinions and possibly to open people's minds and to change it. But I think overall, the average audience at a comedy show doesn't like. Honestly, I don't feel like they want to hear that kind of stuff. I feel like they want to just come, forget about their worries, and have some laughs. And often it's an easy way to like divide a room or to turn people off. But I personally think it's very important, and I try to use my platform. I try to use my act to talk and discuss about things that I feel are important and that I want to bring more awareness to. But it's also a thing where it's like you gotta, feel out the room. You gotta know your audience, and you gotta pick and choose when you want to do your material, and if it's more important for you to express your political opinions, or is it more important for you to make sure that the audience at that particular show is having a good time. So that is like a fine line that you have to like walk, but something that, as I've gotten more and more involved with advocacy for Palestinian human rights, I find that it's more even important, and I feel more compelled to try to talk about these difficult subjects and things that, turn people off and have been considered toxic conversations in the past, and try to, make it not so toxic, try to open people up and try to use comedy as a way to, educate and hopefully shift some perspectives.
And that's why I said in the beginning, because it's a beautiful art form that allows someone to convey such a message, as tough as it is, as emotional as it is, as traumatic as it is, in a way that's educational and insightful. And with someone like yourself and that voice, I want to ask you, October 7th, we all know the event that took place, and we all know what's been happening since. When you first heard about the attack on October 7th, in your mind, did you think that the following repercussions or just the actions that's going to go against Palestinians in the next few weeks, did you think it was something to be small, or did you think it was going to be something as terrible as what we're seeing right now? Well, like, what was your mind going through when you first heard about October 7th and the unfolding events afterwards?
I mean, it's no surprise at all Israel's reaction. And I actually had theories about things like this happening before it happened. And my theories are coming to a reality, because even more so, and we're seeing that all across the world, because sadly, you know, uh, Israel's actions are a reflection on Jewish people everywhere. And I think it's unfortunate that the actions of Israel like are having making people think poorly about Jews, even though Israel does not represent all the Jews. There are Jews everywhere that are calling for ceasefires, that are against the Israeli extremist government, against Netanyahu, against settler expansion, against settler violence, against the dehumanization and subjugation of the Palestinian people. But Israel has really, made it its mission to kind of really tie itself to Judaism, even though a lot of very Orthodox and religious Jews feel that, like, the state of Israel and Zionism is in direct conflict to the Torah, to the religion, to Jewish values. But I think that's part of Israel's propaganda, because what I like to say is that it's able to then hide behind Judaism as a religious shield to get away with its crimes. And it's unfortunate. So, I mean, it's no surprise that was going to happen. I don't think anyone's surprised. I can't see how even, Hamas was surprised that this was going to be the response and this was going to be the reaction. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that attack happened on October 7th. It's unfortunate how all these Palestinian civilians now are paying the price for that. And I do not feel that Hamas represents them, especially the millions of children that live in Gaza.
Yeah, to add on to your point, like I disagree. I don't believe Israel represents all Jewish people. Like that's obviously like not right. Specifically, for example, when like there's a terrorist attacks and like for example, if someone considers himself Muslim, he does it, and like oh all Muslims are this, and I'm like that would make no sense because I'm like it's 2 billion Muslims, and that was the case, the world's over. So in my head, I don't believe one person, one group represents a kind of people because obviously there's different people. Even when I went to some Palestinian protests recently, there was a lot of like Jewish people there supporting and helping out with the cause, and obviously making sure that we're all okay, and we as a community should all know that it's like I always use this example. If someone at a company does something bad, we're not gonna start saying, "Oh, the whole company's trash, the whole company's shit, like fuck the CEO or whatever." We're gonna be like, "No, that person did something wrong. He should get reprimanded for it." And I feel like when it comes to this issue, because I'm Palestinian myself, and when it comes to Palestine and Israel, I think that a lot of people always want to delve in and like start using religion as an example. Like religion is not the case. I'm like these aren't the teachings of the prophet or none of that. It's just these extremist people who have these shitty ideologies and want to like make sure that their thought goes through and make other people who have nothing to do with it bad, and they have to start answering questions, which is obviously awkward in my opinion, because then you have to start answering for this group. It's like we don't believe in this is wrong, this is not what we do. Even for me as a Palestinian, sometimes there's certain things that like certain groups do, I'm like no, we don't agree with it from a Muslim standpoint.
Right. No, I think, Israel really wants, the world to believe that this isn't an attack on Israel, it's an attack on Jews. It's an attack on Judaism. And I strongly disagree with that. I think that's Israeli propaganda. I think that when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, which I'm totally against, especially the methods that they used, they weren't attacking Jews. They were attacking Israel. They were attacking Israelis. I mean, we haven't gotten the records, but there are Christians and Muslims that live in Israel too. I don't think the members of Hamas were running around being like, wait, are you Jewish? No? Okay, we're going to move on to the next person. Like, they were killing anybody. And I'm sure when we find out exactly more about the 1,400 people, we will find out that there were Christians that are amongst them. There are Muslims that are amongst them. And this isn't an attack on Judaism. It's an attack on Israel. Unfortunately, Hamas's original charter really went out of its way to talk about the eradication of Jews. I know they changed their charter in 2017, but it's still a bad look. I also understand how it's kind of synonymous in Palestine, Jews and Zionists. And often when people are saying Jews, they really just mean Israelis or they really just mean Zionists. But still, like, it's not good that there is that, anti-Semitism exists outside of Palestinian advocacy, and it's a real thing. It's on the rise in America. I'm sure it's on the rise in Canada. This was all happening prior to October 7th. We had a little more than a year ago, we had one of the biggest killings of Jews in the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, one of the worst hate crimes that we've seen in America. But it's important that we differentiate the difference between, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred for, stereotypes like the Jews control the media, the Jews control the banks, blood libel, bullshit from the elders of Zion, and then people that want to claim anti-Semitism for being pro-Palestinian human rights, which isn't anti-Semitic at all. But again, I think this is some sort of like propaganda that Zionists and Israel uses to silence people of the crimes that they commit.
100%. I definitely agree with you. I have as a follow-up question to what you were saying. So comedy has the power to challenge norms. Are these particular social and political issues you feel strongly about addressing through your comedy platform?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm very outspoken about Palestinian human rights, so that's definitely something that I care about. And, I definitely care about, freedom for all. I have political opinions when it comes to America and speaking out against them. I'm no fan of Donald Trump. Unfortunately, Biden has shown that he's awful and horrible. And even though I voted for him in the last election, I'm sickened by him, especially by the way he's responded to some of the things that's happened, with Israel and Palestine in the last month. And I feel, particularly with him, he sucks, but people are so afraid to say he sucks because they don't want Trump coming back. And it's like we're in this horrible situation. So, those are things that I've been outspoken about in the past. But obviously, I've been very outspoken about Palestinian human rights. I have developed somewhat of a following for that, arguably more so for that than I have for my comedy. And, it is something that I have brought in on stage to discuss in my comedy, to try to raise awareness, and to, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And maybe with a couple laughs, people will be a little more open to listening and hearing different perspectives, or, something that is against what they believed in the narrative that they've been, accustomed to their whole lives.
As far as propaganda, I know you talked about how the Israeli government will obviously use Judaism as a form to way to, just blur the lines. So therefore, it's more of a Judaism versus Islamic problem or issue and conflict, right? And how those lines and those ties helps them hide the Zionist movement and their ideology and their forefront. And therefore, as you said, it puts a bad name, stigmatism, on all the Jews involved, right? My question is, with the media, as we've seen from the news outlets, whether BBC, CNN, Fox, everyone else, to even Piers Morgan with all his interviews and him saying that October 7th was the worst attack I've ever seen in the last 50 years. How do you process the media's response to it, the narrative that they push out? And as a comedian, not only does it make you laugh, but does it make you come up with more bits as far as information to tackle as you're performing every night in front of an audience that's trying to find out more information on ways to understand in a way that the news obviously put out what's going on right now in the conflict?
I mean, listen, I think, this has become as much as an info war as it has as a regular war. And while the people of Palestine obviously are suffering horribly, there are many people in Israel that are still suffering, that are, their loved ones are being held hostage, or they were deeply affected by the attack of Hamas. But, I do think that, like, the media can't be trusted. Especially the Western media. And I definitely encourage people to never accept just, one outlet, never just, get your information from one media source, but to, check out multiple media sources to find out information, and to, check out media sources from platforms that might be the opposite of what you typically agree with, to just gain deeper perspective and to get a better understanding. I got to say, when it comes to Piers Morgan, I've actually been very impressed. And I think that he has given a platform to more Palestinian voices than almost anybody in the mainstream media has these days. And I think that he is an ally to the Palestinian cause. And, what he's been doing and the guests that he's been doing and showcasing the type of questions that he's been asking has really been some of, the best coverage of this because he is allowing Palestinian voices to have that voice, which typically they don't. And the media is very, one-sided. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I just want to add on. I definitely agree with you in terms of what you were talking about in terms of like researching different outlets and medias. You can't always like believe one kind of source, because I find when it comes to this specific issue, Israel and Palestine, I always talk to people like, oh, I don't know about it, like, but then when they want to talk about astrology or science, they know everything. I'm like, who gives a shit about that? No one cares about it. But when it comes to Israel and Palestine, not even taking a minute to go research something on Google, or like now with AI, it's so easy. You can like Israel versus Palestine, tell me information. So I think a lot of people is like they always want to believe what the media says, and the media doesn't know everything. They're only showing you one part of it. And I think it's really important. You always go do your research and say, okay, let me see some viable people. And it's also people, because that whole like Palestine Israel goes back 7,500 thousands of years. So it's like you can go do your research and ask people who are much more knowledgeable. The media only knows only a bit of it, and sometimes, yes, Pierce Morgan did a great job with obviously interviewing like Palestinians and people who know great about the topic. But I think for me is like the one thing I agreed with you is you hit the nail on the coffin, is that I think a lot of people don't do a great job in terms of researching on their own. And they only want to believe one source of media and be like, oh, I know about the issue now, when obviously it could be sensitive if you don't know everything altogether.
No, absolutely. I get sent a lot of different articles, informations by friends or people that follow me on social media. And, some of it I'm like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. But then when I go and try to actually do some research and find multiple sources to confirm it, back it up, like, it doesn't exist. And while, there's a ton of Israeli propaganda, there is propaganda on the other side as well. And I feel like it doesn't serve either side well. And, as people, we really need to, investigate for ourselves and not take anything at face value and just try to delve deeper. I mean, I don't really watch CNN. I don't watch Fox News. I don't watch a lot of these mainstream media sources. A lot of the information I get more is from research that I do online, different articles, different news sources. But sometimes I will tune in to some of those to hear what someone's saying. I know Anderson Cooper was interviewing a nurse who was in Gaza, an American nurse, and I did tune in to hear what she had to say, and I thought it was very compelling. And I don't see how anybody could not listen to her and listen to what she has to say and not have empathy for the Palestinian people and what they're going through. But it's also a thing for what you were saying earlier. A lot of people are afraid and have been afraid to talk about it. I think it's shifted a little bit now because it's happening in real time. Everyone can see it, and more people are standing up and getting involved. But for a long time, a lot of people would shy away from this conversation. I think a lot more people have a Jewish friend than they have a Palestinian friend. I think a lot more people, have been students to the mainstream media and the narrative that they know, where kind of Israel is this bastion of democracy and freedom, and Palestinians are Islamic fundamentalists who, want to kill gay people and disrespect women and all these things that aren't necessarily true. But these are, prejudices that people have all over the world, certainly in America. And I think, when you say things like, we know that Israel doesn't represent all Jews, we're not against Jews, like, I think that it's so powerful. And actually, someone had sent me a DM being like, we're going to kill you, you kike, and, all the Jews got to go and whatever. And I posted that on my social media. And when I did, I lost thousands of followers for posting the hate that I got, and people were saying this isn't real. You're playing into Zionism propaganda and all this bullshit, and that may very well be the case. It might have been a Zionist just trying to mess with my head. It could have also just been a regular anti-Semite just trying to spread hate. It could have been a multiple of things. But I think that was what was the most powerful about me posting it, was the amount of comments that I got from Muslims, from Palestinians, from Arab people being like, We have no problem with the Jewish people. We have no problem with Jews. Our problem is with the occupation. Our problem is with the forced displacement. Our problem is with the 75 years of oppression. Because this is what a lot of people in America, a lot of Jews all over the world, they don't understand. They don't accept that. They think all Palestinians want to kill white people or whatever. End of story. And I think coming out that way and people expressing that, that's what the world like needs to see. They need to hear people being like, we got no problem with Jews, we have problem with the state of Israel.
It's true. And obviously, like we talked about, right now, it's an open air prison, the largest in the world. And you have a system where people are oppressed. Um,
It's more accurate to call it a concentration camp because people in prison, they did something wrong. People in prison, they get food and water. People in prison, they have a date where they're going to get out of prison. The people in Gaza don't have that. So I know a lot of people, a lot of journalists want to call it open air prison, but I was listening to Professor Norman Finkelstein, who family was Holocaust survivors, who's a Jewish person, who's very outspoken about Palestinian human rights, and he was really driving it home how it is a concentration camp, and I think that's a more accurate description.
Definitely right. Yeah, I even saw an article where 300 surviving members of the Holocaust felt the exact same way, had the exact same sentiment. And right now, it's a system as well, pretty much similar to apartheid in South Africa as well. And my question to you is, as we know, with social media and the world being more connected and people having different ways of expressing their platforms, we are able to speak more about this than previous generations and eras, right? But there is a certain amount of group of people that do not feel comfortable talking about this because they feel as if they might lose their job, they might not get into certain places such as school and different offers. How do you talk to people and try to tell them that you're able to express your opinion and talk about this in a way without resorting to fear of losing something that's not really worth it compared to what people are actually losing out as far as their lives, families, and their rights to live as well in Palestine?
This is that's it's a very difficult question because of course the people are what they're going through in Gaza, what the people are going through in the West Bank at the hands of extremist settlers and the violence is absolutely horrible. But to many people, losing their jobs, losing their livelihood, it's horrible to them too. So I know it's hard to be like, oh, who cares if you lose your dumb job? People are fucking dying over here by the thousands, 4,000 kids. Who cares about the job you were complaining about last week that you didn't even like? But to those people, that is their lives. That's what they know, so they are afraid. It's very hard in America. People are losing their jobs. People are getting doxxed. There is this unfortunate thing, Hamas might want to take your life, but it seems that Jews and Israelis will want to ruin it forever, which is very sad and unfortunate. It's something I struggle with too. And there are many states in America where you can't boycott Israel or you will lose your job if you're working, for someone that has something to do with like the government. There's a great documentary called Boycott about it, directed by this amazing filmmaker Julia Basha, who works for this organization Just Vision, that does a lot of stories and storytelling that aren't being told about what's happening in Palestine and Israel. And the film Boycott's really great, and we're seeing this everywhere. The Harvard students that wrote the letter, they were losing jobs. There was a CAA agent who just posted something, a story on her Instagram about how now we're finding out who's okay with genocide, and she had to step down for her leadership position. So like it's easy to be like worried about your future because of this, and that's how powerful Israel is. And I think like that kind of uh, ruining people's lives, that kind of inability to speak out against Israel's ongoing, violations of Palestinian rights just kind of shows who is the authoritarian figure that, is in the wrong. And like, I don't know what to say to those people because, I lose gigs, I lose things. People, tell me, I had a manager at a comedy club be like, Jonathan, you got to calm it down a bit on the Palestine stuff. It's too much. It's going to hurt you. And I see it and I feel it. But at some point I had to make a choice, you know, to be true to myself or my career. But I got to be honest with you guys. I have hundreds probably of videos that I haven't posted because I'm like, this is maybe a little too much. This is a little extreme. And not so much because I'm worried about getting fired or, losing gigs, but more so because I am Jewish. I do care for the well-being of Jewish people. And even though I disagree with Israelis, I'm not the biggest fan of Israelis. I want them to live a life of freedom and dignity as well. And I'm worried about some of the content I have, spreading too much hatred, which isn't what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to spread awareness. I'm trying to acknowledge the crimes that we have done so we could be better and we can move forward because, Israel does exist, but I don't see how it can continue to exist over the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, over Palestinian dead children. Like, it can never do that. And in this world, in this situation, Israel, Palestine, there's so much finger pointing. Your side did this, your side did this, Hamas did that, Netanyahu did this. And that doesn't get us anywhere. That got us here. We got to point the fingers at ourselves. We got to say, what are we doing wrong? What are we contributing to the problem? And how are we going to change that to move forward for a better world for all?
I think right now, like there should be a lot of healing with everything that's going on in the world, and you as a comedian have that power to obviously like make people laugh, bring light to the situation, and comedy can be a source of healing. So, have you ever encountered moments where your humor played a role in helping others cope with difficult situations, societal issues?
I mean, I've done comedy and had people approach me after that they are going through something difficult in life, whether it's personal or physical, and how seeing the show and my comedy and like laughing really took their mind out of it and really helped them. Of course, the Palestinian advocacy that I've done, I've gotten a lot of positive response from people. About peace and wanting a better world and humanity, which I've really appreciated. So I mean, yes, I definitely have encountered that. I definitely think it's the responsibility of comedians not just to make people laugh, but to push boundaries. I think that's what the greats did, from George Carlin to Richard Pryor to Dave Chappelle, who is absolutely I think the GOAT.
And even speaking about that, like you talked about how you have certain videos you haven't released because at the same time you don't want to hurt your community to the extent where you're seen as an outsider, right? Like a traitor. A lot of people right now with this conflict, they might have friends on social media that's posting content, whether they're pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, and it's causing a lot of issues amongst friends, family members, and people in the community. And instead of talking it out and trying to find out why they have that understanding or perspective, they're just going back to pointing the finger, and therefore a lot of relationships are ruined, right? Even some of my friends that have posted content supporting either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, and then other people hit me up saying like, "Can you believe what this person said?" Or "How did we post this story? What's wrong with them?" And then it becomes the same cycle of just pointing the finger, as opposed to having a conversation about the issue, why you feel such a way. Was it something that you inherited from your family, from a certain article or a certain news channel? How do you think people, especially where they live, friends, people within the community, if they have different opinions about conflicting sides, how should they create a solution to talk it out, as opposed to, like you said, pointing the finger, which doesn't solve anything overall, especially on a local level?
I mean, it's difficult. I think a lot of people are experiencing that. I know I have, I am. But, you know, I think we got to be open to people. It's okay to have different beliefs. It's okay to have different opinions. Uh, we got to be able to understand each other's opinions so our opinions can be better. Talking to people is so necessary, even when you don't agree with them. Gaining their perspectives, trying to get some of their knowledge. It's not about trying to convince them of your way. It's more trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think that's a problem that comes up in this, where people just want to be like, you're wrong, I'm right, instead of being like, let me really listen to you and understand you, and let me have my perspective and my point of view become more nuanced and more informed because I understand where you're coming from. And then perhaps we could exchange information to try to come together. Because let's be real. If we, the people living outside of Israel and Palestine, can't even come together, in disagreement of what's happening, how do we expect the people in Israel and Palestine to ever come together for a better world for all? Because let's be real. I know there are attitudes on both sides that the Palestinians have to go or the Israelis have to go, but we have to have a level of realism of to what the future is going to be. And I understand that Israel has done a lot of crazy shit. I also understand that organizations like Hamas and other, it's like it doesn't equal up, but have also done bad things, and people in Israel have suffered bad things at the hands of, Hamas. It doesn't mean it's on the same level, but both people have been hurt from it. But we got to figure out how are we gonna live together for a better future instead of just letting the past dictate an even worse one. I mean, people are all like, Hamas, it was a resistance movement and they attacked for resistance, and that may very well be, but how did that help? That only hurt Gaza more. That only hurt the Palestinian people more, and it's unfortunate that that's the position that Palestine is in. But people like Jonathan, what do you expect us to do? How do we live with our oppressors? How do we live with the people that stole our land? How do we live with the people that murdered our parents and murdered our family and shit? I don't fucking know. But there have been oppressed people throughout history that found a way to move forward with their oppressors for the betterment of their people. So, I mean, the African American community, racism still exists. Bigotry is still around. But it's not like slavery. It's not like the Jim Crow laws. It's not like we have made progress. We have moved forward, and that is possible. And I think that we all have to have in mind that the goal is a better world for all, not just one people. And the
Yeah.
only way we're going to be able to accomplish that is together.
Yeah, just want to say something quickly to your point. I think it's really important because I think when it comes to topics like racism or like Palestine, Israel, or like any other topic that is that is necessary, like has a lot of like sensitive information. I think a lot of people are either subjective a lot of the times because they come from a certain place, or for example, racism is a huge issue which still happens in work, or like based off your certain color, you get treated a certain way. And I think it's really important that when you talk about something, you go do your research because there's a lot of people who are much more educated than you, who can who can obviously out debate you, who can bring facts into this. And I think a lot of people, because they come from a certain area, they'll be like, oh, this is how I feel. Well, we all feel a certain different way. And it's also unfair to be like, well, because of you, but also then again, that person could be like, well, because of you, I feel this way. So I think it's really important when it comes to people's opinions. I heard this beautiful quote. It's like there's a difference between listening and hearing. Listening, you're trying to understand someone's point, and hearing, you're trying to just like respond. And I think a lot of the times when you have discussions, you always try to see people out debate you because they just want to have your point over yours. Almost they're trying to oppress you in a debate versus like, okay, let me see what this person's saying, regardless of if I disagree with him, but let me still be respectful because maybe we can come to a common ground.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we got to be hearing each other out, and we got to, be open to other opinions and perspectives that aren't our own, even if we disagree with them. And that's the only way we're going to grow and become better as a people. And it's not about just screaming into your echo chamber the things that you believe in that the people believe back. And we have to be reaching the people that don't agree with us. Those are the people that we need to reach. Those are the people that we need to get through to. So by just dismissing them because we disagree with something that they say, that's never going to move the conversation forward. That's never going to help.
I guess like how you talked about before, as far as the oppressor and those who are oppressed, and to come together, find a solution, being meaningful, and how if we are able to act this and practice this on the outside, it makes it not easier, but it allows those who are going through it right then and there to make a better transition. And when you talked about the African community, like African American community, and the whole like Jim Crow laws, slavery and stuff, and as we know, those things are abolished, but still kind of practiced with the 13th Amendment, and you have like the whole prison, the prison industrial complex, and all these different things. There's still nuances, right?
Yeah, police brutality, and so many things that African Americans still face when it comes to prejudices.
Yeah.
But it's just the world's sad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jews have prejudices too. The LGBT community has like so many people. The Uyghurs in China. There are minorities in every country around the world that are still facing oppression, and it's unfortunate. But we are like it. It seems like we are getting a little better, and we got to continue to try to get better, and we can't just throw up our arms and say, "Oh well, there's still racism, so fuck it." It's like it's sad, and I know it's easy for me to say because I don't experience that much racism. Sure, I have experienced some anti-Semitism in my life, but I am white, and I get the privilege that comes with that.
Exactly, but how do you like as a counter argument for those who be like, okay, I understand that we are making slower movements and stuff, and it's less a form of oppression for different minority groups, but for some people, there's like I just want to disrupt the system. So this whole like capitalism, settler colonialism mentality, and how it's able to shape the world for what it is, that has to be totally dismantled. And with the set a new form of society and new type of leadership, a new type of infrastructure where the way states communicate and interact on a geopolitical stream is more together, is more nuanced. So therefore, global North doesn't have more power than global South countries. So the G7, there wouldn't need to be a G7, right? You wouldn't have the rise of the BRICS movement if it was not for the exclusive nature of the G7. So do you, when people say like, oh, I just want to get rid of the oppressive structure of what it is and just eradicate it for what it is, that's the only way we're going to solve this Israel, Palestine, or any other minority um, situation? Do you think people are just being like too extreme in their solution, or like you said, they should just take more practical steps and how things will get better? There still will be oppression in different ways, but it's better that it's going to happen through baby steps and us learning, communicating, and getting through this in a positive manner through better, realistic policies and forms, as opposed to trying to go for the all in and be all attack the system and this type of anarchist ideology.
I mean, listen, it sounds kind of good, but I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's really possible. And from what we've seen, it doesn't reflect well on the movements that they represent when they come at it at this anarchist standpoint. And unfortunately, I mean, we're not at that place in society where most of the world is like, yeah, let's go for it. I think most of the people are like, your methods and what you're doing right now are ridiculous and crazy, and they take away the seriousness of what your cause is, because it seems like you're obviously more interested in just causing trouble, hurting people, than you are in actually making these changes, and you don't have concrete significant plan or actions to make the changes that you say you want to see come true. You kind of just want to, be a dick, for lack of a better words, in a lot of these situations. I mean, I would love to disrupt the system. It definitely needs to be disrupted, but I don't think murdering 1,400 Israelis and the brutality that it seems to have been done with, which I'm still researching and I'm still trying to find out exactly the truth, because there is so much misinformation, and the accusations that came out before anything was even proven were horrendous and horrific, and people were already assuming the worst. But we like I think that's a good example. I think if Hamas's attack would have been less brutal, their methods wouldn't have involved, such horrors. I think people wouldn't have had such a hard time dismissing what they did and dismissing, Palestinian movement as they are right now. I understand they've been living in this concentration camp for over 20 years. They finally broke free. Of course, they're going to be pissed. They're a little crazy. Most of them were 20 years old. That's all they've known their whole lives. But, I know it's privilege again to hold those people to our Western standards of morality, but still, like, that is something that has to be kept in mind. Like, the world does work in a certain way. Perception of violence and hatred does exist. And to just ignore those and be like, well, we're going to do whatever we want because of our oppression, and no one's going to tell us how we should resist, and we have the right. Like, no one's going to tell you, but it's going to make your fight for freedom even more difficult. Is what I think, and I mean, that's just my opinion about it.
And yeah, it's a beautiful answer, and that's the whole fight. It's just like, how do we create resolution and peace, and how do you go about it? The methods. Obviously, those want to take a more neutral stance, where you have both parties involved and able to have a longer form of dialogue. Those want to take an extremist approach, go for the juggler, and just disrupt the system and put in our own set of solutions. But it kind of reminds me of Afghanistan when the Taliban took over, because it's kind of actually a similar situation, because it's just like they took over, but their methods and policies and how they practice is so different from how people practice in neighboring countries. And obviously, the West is not it's not, they don't like it at all. They don't appreciate it at all. And even those who live inside that state as well are not receptive to the new rules that they've been enforcing. And that's a kind of more realistic approach. What would happen if certain things were to happen, if Hamas was somehow able to disrupt the system and they somehow became a form of government, right? It reminded me of 2000, where Israel's prime minister and also Yasser Arafat, when they had the conference with Bill Clinton, and they almost reached a settlement. But obviously they went back and forth. Now, when you're talking with people about this conflict, do you get annoyed, or do you have a solution when people talk about, I think there should only be one state, or we should have a two-state solution? Like, when that question comes up, is it something for you that's like, okay, guys, I know that's something that we want to happen, but before we could get to that, we have to focus on healing and having a concrete background of what we've been through and how we could actually move together before getting to the point of a one-state or two-state solution? Because even in that aspect and framework, there's going to be arguments and conflict about what type of percentage does Palestinians gain back, or what type of percentage of Israelis refuse to give up as far as their land. So when people ask you about one state, two state solution, is it something that you think that people are just jumping to conclusions, or is a dialogue we should have at the moment?
I think a lot of people, they want an answer to that question. They want to be able to frame the conversation with having that kind of information. I am reluctant as a white Jew living in America to tell the people that live there what I think they should do. For a long time, I did believe that a two-state solution was the best way. From my interactions with Palestinian people, it seems like they're more interested in a one state under a democratic rule. But I think, personally, I think right now there's no reason to be talking about one state, two state solutions. I think what needs to happen is that settler expansion and violence in the West Bank needs to end. That's what we need to focus on. We need to stop the settler violence that is a daily occurrence in the West Bank. We need to stop the illegal expansion of settlements. And let's do that step. Let's do that one step, which I feel like almost most people on both sides agree with. Most American Jews are against settler violence. Most Israelis are against settler violence, like so many people are. Let's start with this little thing. Let's show Palestinians, let's show the world we're taking this one step. And after we accomplish that, we could move on to the next steps. But I think people want to, it's the same thing. People want to jump to the future as the same way they want to jump to the past. We were here first. We were here first. I mean, it's crazy to me how many people want to have the same conversation and like comments on my videos about who was here first. Where like, it doesn't matter anymore. There are people there now who are suffering. And how are we going to end that suffering and promote a better future for all these people that live there? Because having this conversation, we were here first, no, we were here first, isn't helping and isn't adding anything to a peaceful, prosperous existence for, Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at the end of the day is like you have to come together and obviously talk and obviously be objective about it and like just keep your emotion out of it and like because there's too many innocent lives which are dying. It's sad to see. Any innocent life is a life still dying. Like at the end of the day, someone lost a dad, someone lost a brother, someone lost a son, someone lost whatever. Like there's too many lives dying. Obviously, you see it on social media, and I think it's really important that like a lot of governments who have the power to say, "Yo, let's sit together, let's talk, and let's discuss this," because there's a lot of innocent lives dying. Because if you hypothetically this happened in America, or happened in Canada, or happened in any like Western country, this would have stopped. This would have stopped immediately. Because I'm like, come on now, like there's a lot of lives who are dying, and like everyone just watching. Yes, this time, like from 2 years ago, from like Sheikh Jarrah, when like there was like I felt as if this year's a lot of people more waking up. It's like, okay, stop the violence, stop the genocide, stop whatever. Like both sides need to like relax and like find a common ground because there's too many innocent lives are dying because the sight of losing your son or your daughter, your brother, your dad, your mom is already like scary enough. Like the fact that people have to wake up from both parties or wherever you are in the world and wake up, oh shit, I don't have a mom no more, I don't have a dad no more, I don't have a brother no more, is like hard to live with at this point because now it's like one day they were here, one day they were gone. There's too many innocent lives which are dying on obviously both sides, and I think that as you said kind of before talking about this whole two-state, three-state, whatever one-state solutions, like more so, okay, we need to ensure that no more wars we're able to live because at one point we all lived in peace. So I don't understand where the issues are. Like if you go further back in history,
Relatively in peace, but there were issues between the Palestinians, who I guess in 1948 weren't called Palestinians, but the people who lived there, and Jews who were there prior to the state of Israel. Of course, there was the Hebron massacre. There were many other instances that happened, but yes, for a long time, people did live there in more peaceful coexistence. I would hope that could happen again. That would be great. Um, Personally, I think all the religious dogma that people have. They. I'm not a religious person. I'm a Jew culturally. I identify more as an agnostic. Um, I think people should be more concerned with this life than worried about the next life or what happens. This is what we have now. Of course, religion has been a part of that. And if you want to, trace this all the way back to the Bible, to Abraham, how he had two sons, and that's when this conflict really started, when Ishmael was the older son, but the younger son, uh, Isaac, was going to get, Israel and get all the land because he was born of Sarah. And that started this family feud that's gone all these years where it's like, we are the same people. We're literally the same people. We love the same land. We come from the same place. The people who hate one of us, they pretty much hate us both. The people who are anti-Semitic, they're Islamophobic as well. We should be getting along. We should be having each other's backs. But the truth is, there are, geopolitical reasons why things are happening. There are other, evangelical Christians believe that the apocalypse and the coming of Jesus will only happen when all the Jews go and have a holy war and die. So, there are other factors at play. I do feel that Jewish people are being manipulated, and that, Israel is used as a tool for the West, like you had mentioned earlier, because we want to have the bastion of whatever we perceive as our democracy, our freedoms in the West, that we don't think, the Arab people share those views or have them. And we want to put them there and make them have it. Whether that's right or wrong, like, I don't know. That's a totally different, conversation to have. But those are also, things to keep in mind with what is happening, where both people are being used and manipulated, for other people to profit, whether it's geopolitically, whether it's just for money, or it's religiously.
Exactly, and you specifically hit the right point because it's self-interest at the end of the day, right? So people have motives, actors, political actors, whether it's a state or the leader itself, they have their own motives as well. So my final question to you is, and encompassing everything. Obviously, there's double standards, whether it's religion, gender, all these different preferences, and we see how it exists in society, right? A few months ago with Ukraine, we saw how all leaders around the world collectively came together and condemned Russia for its efforts for the invasion of Ukraine. And whether you believe this is right or wrong, that collective unison and effort and funding involved policies, things, especially from NATO, in order to address the situation was something that the world saw, and a lot of people felt that what happened was wrong. And support of Ukrainian people was something that needed to be uplifted, talked about, and even shared. As we see right now, very, very similar situation, but most of the state leaders, those who are more in power, have the opposite viewpoint, and it's different self-interest reasons why. For those who for or against it, you could do the research. As we see this, it's technically a double standard and a hypocrisy because for Ukrainians who were attacked and obviously their lives were lost, it was a terrible issue. It was something that was viewed as a genocide. Now, what's happening to Palestinians, a lot of them are saying that people dying is a result of war. People dying is a result of attacks once you're defending yourself. Can you speak about whether you think this is a double standard example? And lastly, whether what Palestinians are going through is considered a genocide from their human rights, what they've been stripped away from, and the access that they don't have from, and their current conditions as a concentration camp, not as an open air prison, like you clarified. Do you think this is a genocide?
I'm not an expert when it comes to genocide. From what I've seen and what it seems to me, um, it if it's not a genocide, it's on its way to being a genocide. The Palestinian people have definitely faced horrible, horrible oppression, for 75 years, they've been killed, they've been subjugated, they've been dispossessed. So I think that's horrible. Of course, there's a double standard, but Israel is an ally to a lot of the Western countries, and Russia isn't. So it was easy for them to continue the narrative how like Russia's the bad guy, but it's not so easy to now call this country that America gives billions of dollars to a year, that gives all these weapons to, a bad guy. So of course there is a double standard. And then again, you have Hamas, which kind of, the world views as a terrorist organization. And, it's not because they're a resistance movement, because of their methods, because of their charter, because of their views on LGBTQ, because of their views of women, because of how they seem to be okay with leveraging their own people for their ideology, for how their leaders are, millionaires, if not billionaires, living outside of Gaza while their people are living in some of the worst poverty in the world. Uh, for those reasons, they are the bad guys. So it's easier for them to be portrayed as evil when they're committed this atrocity that all happened in one day, opposed to the atrocities that Israel has committed over 75 years that apparently are a lot easier for the world to swallow when they happen little by little. But when it happens all in one day, people can't handle that. And of course, Jewish victimization is a thing and it's real. And of course, there is anti Semitism. The Holocaust is real. It happened. But, I do think that the media feeds into it, plays into it. I think a lot of Jewish organizations and a lot of Jewish people too uh, are more comfortable feeling victimized and as a victim than realizing I'm not a victim anymore. The Holocaust happened a long time ago. That wasn't me. Anti-Semitism in America isn't the same as anti-Semitism in Europe in the 1900s. And so yeah, there is a hypocrisy, there is a double standard that exists. It makes no sense what's happening in Gaza right now. How are they going to help free the hostages when they're bombing where the hostages are being kept? I keep hearing there's between somewhat of 25,000 to 40,000 Hamas militants. Well, they just killed 10,000 Palestinians. half of which were children. So that doesn't even, like, that's not even a quarter of these Hamas militants. So what are we saying? That we're going to have to murder 50,000 to 100,000 Palestinians? It makes no sense. You know, if Hamas is, their leaders are in Qatar, billionaires, how are we going to eradicate them? You can't eradicate Hamas. All you can do is create the next generation of, you know, terrorists or people that are going to hate Israel or are going to think poorly about the Jews because of the experiences that they're having right now.
And then in closing, as we can see throughout this episode and all the points that we talked about and highlighted and really explained in a very transparent way, we really thank you for that. Right now, we have Osama, Palestinian and religious. You said yourself, you're Jewish culturally and everything that you've been through as well. In this space, right now, this conversation, you guys should, from certain extreme points or perceptions, you guys should be at each other's neck, not talking to each other, insulting each other, not even in the same room whatsoever. But here we are having a conversation. And through that, it does allow people to think intrinsically about what's going on and how they can use their platform or whatever message they have on whatever skill that they can influence in society to make a change. As we know, there's different ways to get out the information. There's different ways to contribute. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, you could donate as well. If you don't feel comfortable donating or you don't have the money, you could go to those in the community and talk to them about different ways to support, right? And it's videos as well to help yourself in the conflict that's been going for a long time, for decades. And we know how tragic it is, but at the same time, we know how empowering it could be if we all just put a step forward. And as far as closing this episode, what is one final thing you could say for us to leave with? So therefore, everything you've been talking about this whole time did not go to waste, but allows us to really educate ourselves and to figure out what can we do just to make one step closer to resolution. Whether we live there, whether we live in any part of the world that we feel as if has some gain of power influence or no influence whatsoever.
Following me on social media. No, I'm just joking. You know, I think we have to keep in mind that this isn't about being right. It's about having a better world. This isn't about fighting and arguing with someone just because they're different than you or they have different feelings or different opinions than you. This is about finding a way to come together to create a better world for all. We're all humans. We all share this world. We all have problems. We all have ups and downs. We all have victories and we all have disappointments. We all have sadness and we all have happiness. And we got to unite as human beings instead of divide ourselves by these silly things, really, that are more constructs that we've created, whether they're religion, nationality, race, ethnicity, and be like, these aren't reasons why we should be separate and be apart. These are reasons why we need to come together and have better understanding to create a better world for all, because that's the objective. And anyone that's want to say, no, the objective is to get rid of Israel, the objective is to get rid of Palestine, then your objective is pain for other people. We got to figure out how to have an objective where it might not be what everybody wants, but sacrificing and compromising is an essential part of life. And it's something that we all have to think of. How can we help move this forward for a better world for all, especially for the people that are suffering and don't perhaps have the same privileged experience that we have, dependent on where we live, who we are, what color our skin is.
And with that, we'd like to thank you so much for your time, the information you provided, and what we could walk away with to make sure that we do a better job as humans. Because no matter what you go through, no matter where you come from, you must find out where you're going. But you can't go through that place alone, and you can't go there without, like you said, sacrificing and compromising some sort of ilk or thing that makes you who you are. So with that, thank you so much, Jonathan Randall, for coming on today's episode. And where could people follow you if they want to see more of your content, comedy shows, or information, your podcast as well, so they can just connect with you?
I'm at Jonathan Randall across social media. My website is thatjonathanrandallguy.com. Of course, you can check out my podcast on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are heard. How You Like Me Now. and the American Jew podcast.
Thank you so much. And everyone listening, have a nice day.
You guys thought we were done? I don't think so. We still gotta wrap it up. Please follow me at Kusa300. Follow my co-host Muhammad at Muhammad.global. Make sure to follow our page at Instagram. Also, make sure to subscribe to all our platforms. We drop every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Thank you. We'll see you next week.